Just because you live a spiritual lifestyle doesn't mean God is going to pay your bills, and monks and monastic orders were no exception. So throughout history, monks have survived by making products like wine, beer, and cheese. In the process, however, they did a lot more than just survive, so let's take a look at how monastic monks changed food forever. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to Come to Cheesus on the Crisp Whisk channel. After that, please leave a comment and let me know what other food stories you would like to hear about. Okay, let's get Thelonious and talk about some monks. Okay, so you probably have some idea of what a monk is. Famous examples include Martin Luther, the guy who kicked off that whole Protestant Reformation thing, Grigory Rasputin, the Russian holy man and mystic who was one hard man to kill, and what about the Dalai Lama? If you know him, you've got that going for you. Monks have played a large role in the history of many religions, including Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism. And across the world, there are a lot of different kinds of monks. But from the widest perspective, a monk is a person who renounces their interest in worldly pursuits to devote themselves to some form of spiritual work, or live a life of contemplation and prayer. They may do this with other monks at a place like an abbey or a monastery, or as solitary individuals. Just like any other building and organizations, abbeys and monasteries need to be maintained. Barring divine intervention, that takes cold, hard, secular cash, which tend to be a thing that monks generally don't have. At the same time, monks generally don't want to beg or otherwise be a nuisance to the public. So despite lacking any true interest in success or commerce, many monks created merchandise that they sold to the masses. These products are generally derived from the monk's physical environment. So if a monk lives near a forest, they'll make something from wood. Or if they live near fertile land, they'll grow something to sell. And if all else fails, they'll put out one of those banger Gregorian chant albums. But three of the major staples of monastic products catalog have always been wine, beer, and cheese. So this video, I'm going to focus on the Christian European monks. If you're a big fan of wine and song, then you might dig being a monastic monk. Wine has always had a special significance to monks, and there's actually a pretty good reason for that. The earliest evidence for wine is roughly 8,000 years old, and it comes from Georgia. That's the country in the South Caucasus bordering the Black Sea, and not the home of the Bulldogs. Wine was also a very popular drink with the Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans. It was the spread of Christianity, however, that made wine an important drink in Europe and the New World, and is partially responsible for its global popularity today. Jews also used their wine in holy rituals, but Christians doubled down with that whole blood of Christ thing. Being a group that's pretty big on Jesus, monks are also pretty big on wine. They needed to perform masses and administer sacraments, so that got them in the habit of cultivating grapes to ensure a steady supply. Over time, monks became experts at vinification, and monasteries grew to be strongly associated, if not synonymous, with the art of winemaking. Monks not only made wine a worldwide phenomenon, they also gave us many types of wine that we have today. Chablis, Pouilly-Fuissé, Pommard, Vasne-Romanée, Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and dozens of Bordeaux are just a handful of the French wine appellations that were first developed by monks. Historian Desmond Seward counted over 100 French wine appellations that had monastic origins. And if you're wondering, he tallied 45 for Germany, 27 in Austria, 17 in Italy, 12 in Switzerland, 9 in Portugal, 7 in Spain, 5 in Greece, and 4 in Great Britain. So yeah, if you're a wine person, thank a monk. Of course, I want to mention that champagne was discovered by a monk. You may have heard of him. His name was Dom Perignon. Yeah, that Dom Perignon. And he was the coolest Dom in history up until Dom DeLuise showed up in the Cannonball Run movies. Wine has been made in the Champagne region of France since the 1st century, and while winemakers in that area were good, the winters were notoriously cold. When the weather dropped below freezing, the wine fermentation process would stop, and when things warmed up again, a second fermentation process would begin. Long story short, that creates carbon dioxide, which is what makes champagne fizzy and bubbly. The bubbly wine was considered spoiled by local winemakers until, according to legend, in 1693, when the Dome decided to give the stuff a try. Apparently, he liked it so much he exclaimed, "Come quickly, I am tasting the stars!" If that sounds suspiciously like an advertising slogan to you, that's because it might actually just be that. Some have suggested the whole legend was really just a 19th century era marketing campaign designed to increase the prestige of Abbey of St. Vaughan wine. The real Dom Perignon, some claim, actually spent his whole life trying to purge bubbles from wine, and would probably have a shit fit if he knew what he was remembered for. Beer is among the oldest drinks human civilization has ever produced. The earliest evidence for beer comes from the 5th millennium BC and was found in the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia, which we can now surmise was a place where people could relax, crack a few brewskis, and read the Epic of Gilgamesh. Beer has been made in Europe for around 5,000 years, and by the 7th century was being made by monasteries. By the medieval period, monastic breweries were common in northern France, Belgium, and Germany, as well as other places where grapes didn't thrive. Christian monks commonly built breweries to sell food and drink to travelers, so they were kind of like a medieval version of TGI Fridays. Many of these monastic breweries disappeared over centuries, but some continue to thrive and still sell beer. Monastic beers have even had something of a resurgence with the craft brewing renaissance of the 21st century. They've got a patron saint for pretty much everything, and the patron saint of brewers is of course a monk. His name was Saint Arnulf of Metz, although he's known in English by the decidedly less impressive sounding Saint Arnold. A Flemish abbot of the Benedictine Abbey of Oudenburg, he discovered that beer drinkers weathered epidemics better than people who didn't partake, although the same story is told about Saint Arnold of Soissons. How many Saint Arnolds are there? The reason Metz is the patron saint of brewers is because when his parishioners went to collect his recently expired dead body in July of 642, they didn't have enough to drink. So they prayed to Saint Arnold, and that tiny bit of beer multiplied until there was enough for everyone. Suddenly, this is going to be the college student's new go-to prayer. If you're interested in trying some beer made by monks, there are plenty of options out there. Westmail, for example, has been made by the monks of the Abbey of Our Lady of the Holy Heart of Westmail in Belgium since the early part of the 8th century, and they still produce 3 varieties of beer, including extra, double, and triple. The Orval Abbey in the Gaume region of Belgium uses a rare strain of wild yeast to make both the Orvel and the Orval Vert, and if you're around at the right time of the year, you can even get a tour of the place. And the Netherlands' Ons Lieve Vrouw van Koningshoven Abbey makes a whole line of traditional ales, including a blonde, a double, a triple, and a quadruple. The process of converting milk from cows, sheep, and goats into cheese goes way back, and monks have been making the stuff since at least the Middle Ages. One of the reasons for that is that cheese is a reliable source of protein, even when something like meat or fish isn't available. Monks ushered in famous cheeses like Parmesan Reggiano, Gruyere, but they are also the inventors of the washed-rind cheese. Known for its pungent flavor, this cheese made by monks tends to be cow's milk. This all got started sometime during the 11th century when monks were using a salted beer solution to clean the walls of the room where the monastery kept their freshly made cheese. The monks noticed that some of the cheese was moldy and decided to use that same cleaning product he was using on the walls on the cheese. Eventually, the cheese developed an orange color and a very noticeable stink. Curiosity got the better of him. The monk tried this weird cheese and found it was creamy and had some roasted meat-like flavors. Today, some washed-rind cheeses are still made in monasteries. Washed-rind cheeses are put in a brine, which is usually salt, but also can be alcohol, with something of a synergy because monasteries were also making wine and beer. Types of washed-rind cheeses made by monks include Munster, which is the Latin word for monastery, a Poisse, which is said to be Napoleon's favorite cheese, and Port Salut. True monastic cheeses are relatively rare these days. Abbey de Tamy, for example, is one that is still produced, and it's known for its nutty, earthy, and fruity undertones. It's produced at Tamy Abbey, which was founded in 1130 in France's Savoie region. You can get it in France as well as most of Europe, but if you're in the United States, that's bad news. This is a raw milk cheese, so it's basically illegal. So what do you think? What's the best thing monks have made? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from Come to Cheesus on the Crisp Whisk channel.